Good morning. As Sherry prayed, and probably many of you know, Pastor Steven's grandfather had a stroke, and he took his father down to South Carolina, is it? North Carolina? And so he's on his way home today. Keep him in your prayers, and he asked me to step in here this morning. So we're going to continue with kind of the character studies that he had started a couple weeks ago. And this morning, we're going to focus in on a characteristic of Jesus. And we're going to focus in on compassion. Jesus was a man of compassion, and this one story just kind of shows the heart of Jesus. We find it in Mark chapter 6, and I'm going to begin reading at verse 30, and we'll read down through verse 44. It's the story of Jesus feeding the 5,000. The apostles returned to Jesus from their ministry tour and told him all that they had done and taught. Then Jesus said, "Let's go off by ourselves to a quiet place and rest a while." He said this because there were so many people coming and going that Jesus and his apostles didn't even have time to eat. So they left by boat for a quiet place where they could be alone. But many people recognized them and saw them leaving, and people from many towns ran ahead along the shore and got there ahead of them. Jesus saw the huge crowd as he stepped from the boat, and he had compassion on them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. So he began teaching many things. Late in the afternoon, his disciples came to him and said, "This is a remote place, and it's already getting late. Send the crowds away so they can go to the nearby farms and villages and buy something to eat." But Jesus said, "You feed them." "With what?" they asked. We'd have to work for months to earn enough money to buy food for all these people." "How much bread do you have?" he asked. "Go and find out." They came back and reported, "We have 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish." Then Jesus told the disciples to have the people sit down in groups on the green grass. So they sat down in groups of 50 or 100. Jesus took the 5 loaves and 2 fish, looked up toward heaven and blessed them. Then, breaking the loaves into pieces, he kept giving the bread to the disciples so that they could distribute it to the people. He also divided the fish for everyone to share. They all ate as much as they wanted. And afterward, the disciples picked up 12 baskets of leftover bread and fish. A total of 5,000 men and their families were fed. This is an important story because it's told in all 4 Gospels. Not many stories are told in all the Gospels, but this is one that is told in all the Gospels. Every night, there was a man who was the town drunk. He would go to the local pub and he would sit on his stool at the bar and he would drink until it was closing time. And then he would head home on a trail that ran diagonally through the local cemetery. And one rainy night he left the bar a little drunker maybe than normal. And as he headed towards home through that cemetery, he was unaware that they had dug a grave right on his path. And so as he walked along, he stepped into that open grave, fell with a splash into that muddy hole. And once he realized that he was in a grave, he tried everything to get out. It was muddy, it was too deep. He tried jumping out, he couldn't. He tried climbing out, it was too slippery. And eventually, he quit trying. And he just sat down in the corner and he passed out. A little while later, after the rain had stopped, there was a school teacher who was on her way home and her car broke down right in front of the pub. The pub was closed. Her cell phone was dead. And the only thing she had to do was she's going to have to walk home. And normally she wouldn't have walked through the cemetery at night by herself, but it's cut off 10 to 15 minutes of her walk home, and so she decided to cut through the cemetery too. Well, a fog had come in over the ground, a low ground fog, and it was really eerie looking, and so she began whistling to try to keep her courage up. And as she walked along that pathway, unaware of the grave, she too fell in the hole. And when she fell, it woke the drunk up. But he didn't say anything. He just sat there in the corner and watched her as she tried to jump out of the hole, as she tried to climb up the wall of the hole, and she too found it impossible. And she was leaning against the side of the grave wall, trying to catch her breath, when suddenly the drunk, in a low voice, out of the corner says, "You're never going to get out of here." And with one leap, she was out and on her way home. That drunk, that night, unexpectedly and unintentionally, helped that school teacher in her distress. And sometimes, like that drunk, we too unintentionally, unexpectedly help someone along life's way. But I think that God wants us to do more than the unexpected, unintentional. I think that He wants us to be intentional in our compassion for those around about us. Think what your life might be like if this week you would decide and you would intentionally pray every day, asking God to allow you to follow in His steps of doing the unexpected intentionally in the lives of those around you. Think how surprised and thankful people in your orb might be. I'm not sure if you've ever thought about it, but Jesus helped people in ways that they never expected all throughout His ministry. Many of His miracles and the acts of mercy that He performed were unexpected by the people that received them. His very first miracle, turning the water into wine at the wedding, was not expected or even asked by the groom or bride. Casting out demons of the man in Capernaum, healing or raising from the dead the widow's son as they were coming out of the town of Nain to take and bury her son, raising Lazarus from the dead, defending the sinful woman who anointed His feet with perfume and tears and washed them with her hair as others looked on with disgust. There are many examples, and enough examples to convince me that Jesus regularly surprised people with His generosity. But this morning, as we get into this, let's go back even before the passage that I read. If you would read the entire chapter, you would find that Jesus sent out His disciples 2 by 2 to go into the surrounding towns to preach and to heal and to teach, to cast out demons. And they did it, and they were very successful. And while they were gone, Jesus received some very bad news. His cousin, John the Baptist, had been taken captive had been arrested by King Herod, put in jail. And during a party that weekend, King Herod had brought John the Baptist out and beheaded him almost like sport for those who were at his party. As the disciples came and were excitedly sharing the things that they had been able to do and the trip and everything, crowds began to gather. And as they gathered, they were interrupting and they were wanting Jesus' attention. They were wanting to be healed. They were wanting to be delivered. And in fact, there was so much commotion and stress that Jesus and the disciples didn't even get a chance to get a bite to eat. You ever have a day like that? The kids are talking to you all at once about different things, and the phone won't stop ringing, and the computer's telling you you have a bunch of email that you need to respond to, and your project at work is behind schedule, and everywhere you look at home there's another job that needs to be done, and you're starting to get lightheaded because you haven't had anything to eat since 5 o'clock when you started your day. Jesus finally suggested that it might be a good idea if he and the disciples got away for a little bit of R&R and find a secluded place. And so they were able finally to get away from this crowd, got into one of the disciples' boats, and decided to take off across the Sea of Galilee. Now, the Sea of Galilee, sometimes we have this big idea of what that sea looks like, but it's just really a big lake. You can literally see across to the other side. And they were going across to the other side, which today would be Jordan, and they were going over there because it was a more deserted place. And as they started out across the lake, they got in the boat, and I'm sure that they were just taking their good old time, just enjoying the beauty of the day, and most of all, the quiet. But when they started out, the people on the shore, they saw the direction the boat was going, and they took off around the lake. And as they went and gone through little towns along, more and more people, until when Jesus and the disciples finally landed on the other side, there was a crowd to greet them, thousands of people. Now, Jesus could have done a number of things. He could have done his sunglasses, got his disciple bodyguards around them, and made their way up into the mountains and say, "We don't have time for this." But Jesus didn't. He had the people sit down, and they were there on the seashore. And it said Jesus felt compassion. Instead of feeling annoyed, instead of being upset, it said he felt compassion for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Now, I don't know how that affects you, but it kind of blows me away that here he is, kind of, emotionally fatigued, exhausted. He was grieving. They were hungry. And he and his disciples just wanted some rest. And yet, here was this crowd. For most of us, if we were in that situation, our predominant emotion would not be compassion. If it was me, I think I would want to get back on that boat and let's just drift away from here. But the word compassion, Jesus had compassion on them. The word compassion means deep awareness of the suffering of another, coupled with the desire or wish to relieve it. Jesus didn't care for the crowd that had gathered out of a sense of obligation. This sense of Jesus had compassion was not, okay, it's my job, I guess I got to do it. Okay, gather around here, let me talk to you for a little while. No, it wasn't that. He was hurt. He was hurt for them because they were like sheep without a shepherd. Herod, their king, was a murderous despot. The religious leaders were more concerned about appearing religious in front of everybody than in leading people to God. John the Baptist, who was one who was speaking the truth, was now dead. And so out of compassion, Jesus began to teach them many spiritual things. What keeps us from real compassion? You know what keeps us from compassion so many times is that so often we just don't think about it. We just don't think about it. We're so wrapped up in our own lives and we're oblivious to the feelings and the needs of people right around us. I think sometimes we suffer from compassion fatigue. We're inundated day after day with images of hurricane victims, tsunami victims, earthquake victims, flood victims, crime victims, war victims, and emotionally we just tune out the needs of other people. The landslide of human hurt is beyond my ability to really do anything, and so I just disengage. And to disengage is the opposite of compassion. The opposite of compassion is just, none of my business. I'll just do my own thing. I have enough problems. Cultivating compassion necessitates that I begin to see the world around me through the eyes of those around me. I heard a story about a man who climbed into a train on his way home from New York to Washington, D.C. The end of the week, and he was tired, and he was looking forward to this train ride home as just kind of a respite for him. He hoped to relax, but there was a man across the aisle who had 2 children. And those kids just seemed to have the run of the place. They were running up and down the aisle. They were hollering. They were picking on each other. They were doing all the things that kids do. And Dad, he just pulled out a book and started reading and completely ignored the whole thing. Well, as the train ride went on, this businessman got more and more irritated and disgusted, and what a crummy dad this was, and he was about ready to explode when it finally came to the end of the ride. And the dad rounded up the kids, pulled down a suitcase from the overhead, and as he began to make his way out, he made eye contact with this businessman. And, you make eye contact, and sometimes, you just need to say something. And he said, I'm sorry about the kids. He said, I guess I let them run a little wild, but we're just returning from their mom's funeral, and I'm just too drained to manage them. And in that instant, the traveler's anger was washed away, and he felt compassion because now he knew, and he saw a little bit through that man's eyes. The next time you hear kids screaming in the grocery store or even in church, instead of letting it annoy you, try to understand what those parents might be going through at that moment. The next time your neighbor's overgrown yard annoys you, maybe find out what's going on in their life. The next time that retail person across the counter seems to be a little curt, maybe try to find out what is behind the story. The next time you see someone with a problem or a need, ask Jesus, give me compassion. Ask God to enable you to feel what Jesus was feeling or would have felt in your situation. But unexpectedly helping others, as Jesus did, involves more than compassion. In fact, the second element in this story of Jesus responding with compassion is a thing that nurtures compassion. We must not only feel what Jesus feels, but we need to think what Jesus thought. Jesus thought about their needs more than his. When Jesus climbed out of that boat, he didn't find the secluded place that he could grieve and encourage his disciples and just get away. The crowd that greeted him could easily have been seen definitely as an intrusion. In his state of sorrow, he should have just gotten in the boat and rowed away. But because Jesus saw people as a sheep without a shepherd, he viewed them as they were. They had just made a journey around this whole big lake, and There were wild animals that could have destroyed them. There were thieves along the road that could have robbed them. They were out in the sun, the heat exhaustion of that area. There's hunger, snakes, dehydration, all the things that they were experiencing at that moment, having made that trip just to see Jesus. Jesus saw them as helpless and defenseless, people that had need. And this kind of thinking enabled him to see that they were in need of a shepherd. And their need for a shepherd was greater than his need for solitude. My problem, and maybe yours is too, that I often am so focused on my needs, my problems, my own hurts, that I don't see those right around me. Such spiritual blindness and insensitivity certainly was operating in the disciples' eyes, and so we find ourselves that way too. Jesus once told them, "Open your eyes and look at the fields. They are ripe for harvest." In other words, he was just saying, look around, people. There's a need. Just look around. Thinking like Jesus demands that we use our powers of perception to size people up, to try to figure out. We often do this subconsciously, but following the steps of Jesus means that I need to be more conscious about it. You know, we make opinions of people very, very quickly. But Jesus said, do more than just a momentary how you feel. Find out. Find out what is going on. The first place we might practice this is maybe with our family, our friends, or those in our orb. You go to take your kids to school. How's your teacher doing? How is that teacher doing? What's going on in their life? What about your neighbor, your parents, your kids, the stress that they might be feeling? The person that you meet across the counter at Walmart or wherever you are that day. What would it be like to enter their mind and try to identify with their hardships, what's going on in their lives? Once we identify a person's need, we want to be able to meet it, like Jesus did when he then began to teach the crowd. But for that to happen, we have to feel and think like Jesus. Compassion without action is just feeling. Jesus began to act upon it, and it says that Jesus taught them. He encouraged them. Once he realized that they were sheep without a shepherd, he began to spiritually care for them. We're told that he taught them many things. Jesus spoke words that built people up, that encouraged them, and so must we. Every day we have opportunities to unexpectedly speak words that encourage and build people up. Solomon noted the importance of words when he said, "The tongue has the power of life and death." Think about that. Your words have the power of life and death. Am I being an encouragement to the people around me? Excuse me a second again. There was a worried housewife that sprang quickly to answer the phone. And she listened with relief at the voice on the other end who said, "How are you doing, darling? What kind of day are you having?" "Oh, Mom," she said, breaking into tears, "I've had such a bad day. The baby won't eat. The washing machine broke down. I haven't had a chance to go shopping, and besides, I've just sprained my ankle and I'm hobbling around. On top of that, the house is a mess. And I'm supposed to have 2 couples here for dinner tonight." Well, the mother was shocked and was at once all sympathy. "Oh, darling," she said, "sit down, relax, close your eyes. I'm going to be over in half an hour. I'm going to do your shopping. I'm going to clean the house. I'm going to cook your dinner. And I'll feed the baby, and I'm calling a repairman that will be over to fix it quickly. Stop crying. I'll take care of things. In fact, I'm going to call George right now at the office and tell him he needs to come home and help out too. George? Who's George? Why, George is your husband. Isn't this 2231374? No, this is 2321374. Oh, I'm sorry. I guess I got the wrong number. There was a pause, quiet, and then the housewife said, "Does this mean you're not coming over?" And without a moment's hesitation, the caller replied, unexpectedly, "Of course I'll come over. Where do you live?" Being an authentic Christian, Christ follower, means that we look for chances to not only give unexpected words of encouragement, but then to lend support. And that goes on to what Jesus did next. He unexpectedly helped. And I'm going to take a moment and put something in my mouth. I guess I don't talk as much as I used to. Jesus unexpectedly helped. He didn't share a short devotional. He could have said, "Listen, okay guys, gather around. Here's the 5 main points of what I would have said." And just gave them a brief devotional and said, "Okay, I thank you all for coming, but it's time to move along. We have some things to get to." No, he gave them the full seminar. And so rather than dwelling on his own problems, rather than experiencing his own grief, getting some well-deserved rest, Jesus focused on their problems and began teaching them. And the story says that he taught them for most of the day. It was getting late in the day, and the disciples were getting a little stressed out and were wishing that Jesus would please just dismiss this crowd and we can get the R&R that you promised us. Maybe one of them said to the others, "Hey, someone really should tell him that it's time for these people to make their way back home so they can get something to eat." And so some of the disciples came around Jesus and told them that we really need to send them away. We're kind of far from the towns, and they maybe need to go to the farmers and little villages and buy something on their way home. They're hungry. Surely Jesus would understand that. But instead, Jesus responds, "Hey guys, how about you all give these people something to eat tonight?" Judas probably was the one that responded, "Are you kidding me?" And he whips out his calculator, 5,000 men, then they have women, children, and $1, $2 maybe per person. Lord, that is crazy. We'd have to work months and months to just get enough money to buy them a little bit of bread to take home and sustain them till they got home. And in a way only Jesus could do, responding to the reasoning of the disciples and responding to their lack of faith, he gently says, "Well, how much food do we have here right now?" About that time, Andrew, Peter's brother, comes up and he says, "Jesus, I found this guy, and a little kid here really, and he has a lunch. He has 2 fish hot dogs and a half a pack of buns. And that's really all we have found in this crowd." Jesus, as he responds to the reasoning of his disciples, and what Jesus was saying didn't make sense, but they were saying, Jesus said, "Feed them. This is all I have. What can I do?" But Jesus. You ever hear yourself saying that sometimes? Given the same kind of excuses as why you can't be compassionate in this situation? But Jesus, it's not safe. But Jesus, I don't have that kind of money right now. But Jesus, if I do this, I'm going to make a fool of myself. In other words, Jesus, what you're asking flies in the face of reason. It makes no sense. And Jesus says, You feed them. And we but Jesus and give our excuses. And it's at this point that Jesus, again, does the unexpected. He told the disciples to organize the people into groups of 50, get them a basket each, and come back to him. He took that bread and the fish, and he prayed over them a blessing. And then he began to break it and fill each disciple's basket, and each disciple took it and came back for more and come back for more until every person had as much as they wanted. Could have been up to 15,000 people there that day, maybe more. They all had as much as they wanted, and when they were done, there were 12 basketfuls left over. Looking through another person's eyes may help us to understand them better. Focusing on their need will help us to think about how we can help them. Speaking words of kindness into their lives will encourage them. But when we reach that point where we need to move from feeling and thinking and speaking to actually doing something, the problem is that many times that we just feel we don't have the resources to do it. And like the disciples, we stand in the presence of the one who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills and the gold in every mine, as we sing sometimes. And yet, we feel, us and God, really can't meet this need. That's when we must surrender our resources to the Lord. Let him multiply them to serve others. In order to help others, I first have to receive from God. I have to, the disciples were able to feed that whole crowd because they received from Jesus. And to meet the needs of those around you, you're going to have to receive from God what you need to be able to meet those needs. Too many times we think that we have surrendered our talents, our time, our resources to God. And when he nudges us to help someone, we hold him out like this. We hold him out like this. Jesus said, if you cling to your life, you're going to lose it. But if you give up your life for me, you'll find it. We find true joy and happiness in our life when we lose what we think is ours to help someone else. And we do this best when we, like the little boy with the lunch, give it all that we have to the Lord and receive back what we need to help others. In the moment, our focus may be on what we're sacrificing. Maybe it's money, maybe it's time, maybe it's just emotional energy. We might think the loss of that is going to rob us of comfort or even joy. It might be that we hold on to it with a closed fist. But even research, secular research, has found that performing an act of kindness for others always makes that person happier. If we really are reaching out to help someone else, it makes me feel happier. And it doesn't matter how small or how big the act may be. It may be just opening the door for someone, putting a quarter in the parking meter as you saw it expire. Maybe it's something as big as paying off the student loan and everything in between. But it makes us feel happier. Now, ultimately, our purpose for treating others well and loving and with compassion is not just so that I'll be happy. That's just a byproduct. We do it because we are called to be his hands and his feet. And this is how Jesus touches the lives of those around us. There was a missionary named Paul who came home for home ministries here in the States. And he needed a car to get around and visit the churches that he would go and visit. His brother, when he learned that he's going to need a vehicle, he was a businessman, and he went out and bought a brand new Escalade, loaded, and gave it to his brother, no strings attached. Use it to get around while you're home. Everywhere he went, this poor missionary coming to the church in an Escalade drew attention, and people said, "Where did you get that?" And so the story would always be told, and everywhere when he would tell the story, people said, "Well, I wish I had a brother like that." One Sunday he pulled into an inner city church in a rather poor section of town, and it was easy to see even in the congregation that people were struggling financially. And after church, people gathered around to say goodbye, and as always, the conversation turned to this Cadillac Escalade that he was getting into. And there was a young high school age boy who was the first to make the response, and the astounded boy says, "You mean your brother gave it to you? It didn't cost anything? Boy, I wish." And there was kind of a pause, and Paul knew what was going to come out of his mouth. He's going to wish he had a brother like that. But what the boy said jarred Paul. He said, "I wish that I could be a brother like that." What is it that motivates you? What's the desire of your heart? How many opportunities to be Christ have we passed up this past week? What are the opportunities that God's going to present to us? Will we let him get our attention? There was a young, successful executive that was on his way home. He was driving through a rather rough section of town, and he had a brand new Jaguar. It's an expensive car, and he was very proud of it. And he was watching kids darting from here to there, and he slowed down when he thought he saw something here off to the side. And as his car passed it, a brick came flying out and slammed into the side of his brand new Jaguar. Well, he was angry. He slammed on the brakes. He jumped out of the car. He ran around there and found the kid and grabbed him, threw him up against the car and said, "What in the world do you think you're doing? Do you know what you just did? You threw that brick into my car, and that is going to be a very expensive repair. Why did you do it?" And the young boy was shaken, very apologetic, and he says, "Please, mister, please, I'm sorry. I didn't know what else to do. I threw the brick because no one would stop." And with tears dripping down his face and off his chin, the young boy pointed to a spot just around the corner of the parked car there, and there he said, "It's my brother. He rolled off the curb and fell out of his wheelchair, and I can't lift him up." And now sobbing, the boy was just beside himself, and he said, "Would you please help me get him back into the wheelchair? He's hurt, and he's too heavy for me." Well, moved beyond words, the driver tried to swallow the rapidly growing lump in his throat, and he hurriedly lifted the wheelchair-bound boy back into his wheelchair and took out his nice clean hanky and wiped the cuts and the scratches and sized him up and felt that everything would be okay. Got him in the wheelchair, and he stood there as the brother started wheeling his wheelchair towards home. It was a slow walk back to his Jaguar. The damage, it was very noticeable there on the side panel of the car. But the driver never bothered to repair that dented door. He kept that dent as a reminder of this. Don't go through life so fast that someone or God needs to throw a brick to get your attention. As a Christ follower, we need to repeatedly ask ourselves, what would Jesus do in this situation? I'll guarantee you there are people this week that God will place in your life for you to unexpectedly yet intentionally show the compassion of Christ. If you'll hear him, and hopefully he won't have to throw a brick. Let him have your attention. Look through the eyes of Christ and to see those around you and allow him to move your heart with compassion that is more than feeling, but is actions to those that need. Will you stand with me? Father God, we're thankful for this example of your character, the compassion that you had for this crowd, but the compassion that you had for a world that was in rebellion against you, and yet in compassion you sent your Son. That Son willingly took our place. Lord, if we have received that grace into our heart, help us not to look away when there are those around us that need the hands and the feet of God. Lord, help us to be your hands and feet this week. Help us to see them as you see them. Help us to be moved to act. Lord, may this word, your word, get our attention. And may we be Christ as you want us to be. We ask in Christ's name. Amen. God bless you. Have a great week.